Imagine waking up tomorrow and having the power to do absolutely anything you want. No job, no responsibilities, no commitments. You could travel anywhere, create whatever you desire, and live on your terms. It's the ultimate form of freedom, right? But wait, picture yourself in this freedom. Days stretching on with no restrictions. You do whatever you want. Yet, after a few weeks, a sinking feeling starts to creep in. You thought you'd feel liberated, but instead you're overwhelmed by something more troubling. Loneliness. Why does true freedom, something you've always dreamed of, feel so isolating? Why does having it all leave you feeling empty? This is the paradox of freedom. The very thing you think will bring joy to your life feels like a silent abyss. What if I told you that the more freedom you get, the deeper your sense of loneliness could become? In this video, we're diving deep into the emotional heart of this paradox. Why does true freedom feel like loneliness? And how can you break free from this emotional trap? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might see freedom and it's a concept we hold dear. It's the key to our desire for peace. Who doesn't long for the ability to choose without constraints? To live without the weight of obligations or societal expectations? We chase this ideal because it promises the ultimate happiness. Freedom means living life on our terms. But what if the pursuit of freedom isn't what it seems? What if, in the end, freedom is the one thing that leaves us feeling disconnected, isolated, and more alone than ever? I want you to imagine this scenario. You've left your job, your home, your obligations behind. You're now living the life you thought you always wanted. No one to answer to, no deadlines looming over you. Yet, after a few weeks, you start noticing something unsettling. You begin to crave the very things you thought you escaped from. The connection, the routine, the sense of belonging. You thought you'd feel free, but instead, freedom feels lonely. This is not just an abstract idea or a philosophical question. It's backed by psychological research, real-life experiences, and deep philosophical inquiry. Today, we'll explore why freedom can feel so isolating, why the very thing we desire the most can leave us in the dark. We'll uncover the emotional cost. The paradox of freedom and loneliness. Let's dive straight into the heart of the paradox. Freedom, unlimited freedom, can actually make us feel more disconnected than we are before. When we hear the word freedom, we tend to think of an exhilarating sense of possibility, right? The chance to do whatever we want. But here's the harsh truth. When we are given too many options, when we are left to navigate life without constraints or clear direction, we often feel lost. Take Barry Schwartz, a psychologist whose work on the paradox of choice will forever change the way you think about freedom. Schwartz conducted studies that show how too many choices don't lead to more happiness. They lead to confusion, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. The more choices we have, the more we question our decisions, and the more we feel isolated in our decision-making process. When you have all the freedom in the world, you're often left alone in a sea of infinite possibilities. There's no one to guide you, no one to help you decide, and that can feel like an overwhelming burden. Imagine being adrift in an ocean of options with no land in sight. Take Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who warned of the dangers of too much freedom. He spoke of the desire to shape our own existence, but he also understood that this extreme freedom could leave us feeling disconnected from others. He referred to it as nausea, the anxiety of being free to create our own meaning in a world that holds us. True freedom, according to Nietzsche, can trap us ultimately. The more we break away from societal expectations and constraints of others, the more we become isolated in the process. But that is the science of social connection. Now you might be thinking, but shouldn't freedom be the answer to feeling tied down? Shouldn't it be the key to happiness? Here's where science flips that assumption on its head. Humans are hardwired for connection. Our brains are built to need social interaction, and without it, we suffer. In In fact, studies show that social isolation is just as harmful to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yes, you heard that right. Dr. Lutzer, Julian Holt-Lundstedt, a social scientist, has shown that the absence of social bonds doesn't just make us feel sad. It has real lasting effects on our physical and mental well-being. We are not meant to be us alone for long periods of time. Our need for connection isn't just a preference, it's a biological necessity. When you pursue freedom and autonomy to the extreme, you might initially feel like you're escaping the burdens of social obligations. This same freedom disconnects you from the very relationships that make life meaningful. Consider the digital nomad nomadism. People living this way are free to travel, work from anywhere, and escape the conventional 9-to-5. But here's the catch. While they may be living their version of freedom, many digital nomads report feeling they're often far from family, friends, and communities that once gave their life meaning. Sure, they're free, but they're also isolated. And that isolation can feel suffocating. No matter how many countries they visit, no matter how many places they live, they struggle with the deep-seated loneliness that comes from being disconnected. From home, from relationships, and from a sense of connection. The philosophical underpinning. Freedom, as a concept, has been explored by philosophers for centuries, and many have pointed to the lonely truth behind it. One of the most significant figures in this philosophical landscape is Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist who saw freedom as both a gift and a curse. In his famous work, Being and Nothingness, Sartre argued that with ultimate freedom comes radical responsibility. When you're free to make any choice you want, the weight of those choices falls entirely on your shoulders, and that weight can be incredibly lonely. Sartre didn't just talk about existentialism as a way of thinking, he experienced it. He spoke of the anxiety and despair that came with understanding the vastness of our freedom, the overwhelming responsibility of choosing our path. Sartre believed that when we realize we are completely free to create meaning, we're also faced with existential dread. This dread isn't just an intellectual idea, it's a deep emotional experience. And then there's Albert Camus, who tackled the notion of the absurd human mind in his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. He argued that the quest for meaning is illusory, and that this knowledge can be both feeling isolated time and the face of an indifferent time. The freedom to make any choice in life is amazing, but it often leads to a profound sense of loneliness. When we realize that nothing really matters. So, true freedom? It doesn't just give you options. It gives you the terrifying responsibility to create meaning in a world that doesn't inherently offer it. And in that process, we often feel alone. The tension between connection and independence. Freedom and connection are like two forces pulling in opposite directions. Society tells us that to be truly successful and fulfilled, we must be independent, free from the constraints of others. But this drive for independence often leads to loneliness. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which shows that before we can achieve the highest form of freedom, self-actualization, we must first satisfy our need for love and belonging. Freedom without connection is meaningless. In fact, the more independent you become, the greater the risk of losing the sense of community that nourishes you. We're living in an era where the pressure to be independent, self-sufficient, is stronger than ever. But the truth is, without connections, relationships, and shared experiences, freedom feels hollow. You can be free, but without love, trust, and companionship, that freedom becomes a solitary experience. The reality of true freedom. Let's look at someone who truly embodied freedom. Stephen Hawking. Hawking was a man bound by a debilitating disease, but he was one of the most brilliant minds of our time. His freedom lay in his alone. His physical limitations, while offering him incredible intellectual freedom, also led to a deep sense of isolation. He had the freedom to choose his work, his legacy, but this freedom came at the cost of companionship, of family, of the emotional connection many of us take for granted. Hawking's story is a perfect example of how freedom and loneliness are intertwined. The more we have of one, the more we risk losing the other. The more you pursue freedom without boundaries, the greater the chance that you'll end up in a world of loneliness. Now, yes, the reality of true freedom. Let's look at someone who truly embodied freedom. Stephen Hawking. Hawking was a man bound by a debilitating disease, but he became one of the most brilliant minds of his time. His freedom lay in his intellect and his ability to shape ideas for transformation. But despite his remarkable achievements, Hawking spent much of his life alone. His physical limitations, while offering him incredible intellectual freedom, also led to a deep sense of isolation. He had the freedom to choose his work, his legacy, but this freedom came at the cost of companionship, of the emotional connection many of us take for granted. Hawking's story is a perfect example of how freedom and loneliness are intertwined. The more we have of one, the more we risk losing the other. The more you pursue freedom without boundaries, the greater the chance that you'll end up in a world of loneliness. Actionable strategies. Here's what you can do to avoid falling into the trap of loneliness while pursuing freedom. 1. Create structured freedom. Freedom isn't about having endless options. It's about choosing your path with your purpose. Create boundaries that help you thrive, but also keep you connected to your community and relationships. 2. Build meaningful relationships. Don't settle for surface-level connections. Seek deep, meaningful relationships that ground you and provide emotional fulfillment. 3. Pursue shared experiences. Whether through hobbies, travel, or work, make sure your freedom includes shared experiences. They will help you form bonds that transcend isolation. 4. Embrace imperfection. Freedom without connection is chaos. Accept that there will be